in the ancient Chinese collection of koans called the Book of Serenity, case 52 is called Caoshan's reality body, or dharmakaya. So this is today's story. The introduction to this case goes like this. Those with wisdom can understand by means of metaphors. But if you come to the place where there's no possibility of comparison, then how will you express it to others? So we're going to talk about and hear about the reality body, the dharmakaya of the Buddha. And really, it's beyond comparison. And yet, this Zen story has a whole bunch of metaphors. It's really kind of a metaphor koan. It's a bunch of Zen ancestors trying to express something about the dharmakaya, the reality body of Buddhas, and the workings of this reality body through metaphors. So from the beginning, I can offer a disclaimer that none of these metaphors quite reach the pure dharmakaya. And yet, it's time for a dharma talk. So we have to use words. Please excuse me. And here's the story. I'll just read through it and then you can elaborate with more words about it and discuss it. So one of the great Zen ancestors, Caoshan, once said to Elder De, Buddha's true reality body, dharmakaya, is like empty space. It manifests appearances in response to beings, like the moon reflected in the water. How do you express the principle of response, Elder De? And De said, it's like a donkey peeking into a well. And Caoshan said, that's well said, but you only said 80% of it. And De said, how would you say it, teacher? Caoshan said, it's like the well peeking at the donkey. So this is a story about the Buddha's true reality body. In Sanskrit, we call it the dharmakaya. What can we say about the dharmakaya, knowing that our words don't reach it? It is boundless. timeless, indestructible, now, this very now, we all share the now that's not changing, the now that has no location, the now that allows everything to appear, timeless now, locationless now. This is the reality of Buddha. We can't lose it. We can't get a hold of it. We can't get rid of it. We can distract ourselves from it with thoughts of past and future, but even they can't really hide the awesome ordinariness of now. And this now, the Buddha's true reality body, is so kind to us. It's so beneficent. It is nothing but radiant compassion and love impartially for all beings. Is it not? So this is the true reality body of the Buddha, the dharmakaya. But that's not the whole story to Buddha. This now that we really can't get a hold of and doesn't look like anything. It doesn't sound like anything. It doesn't taste like anything. It doesn't smell like anything. It doesn't feel like anything. And can't be conceived as anything. Which makes it a little bit hard to relate to. It can manifest as appearances in form, in response to beings, to benefit beings, so that we can relate to it a little bit more. It's already helping us. And sometimes we know that. I think we all know how now is helping us when we're in touch with it. It's kind of like things are pretty much okay when we are now. But because it's so intangible, it offers these form bodies to relate to, for us sentient beings to relate to. Form bodies, they're sometimes called rupakaya, mean form bodies. They appear. This dharmakaya can appear in order to help us. We could call these form bodies response bodies. The response body of the Buddha is that which appears in order to help beings in response to the call of living beings. In the Great Vehicle Sutras, the teachings of the Buddha, there's a sutra called Unraveling the Deep Intent of the Buddha. In Sanskrit, Sandhi Nirmochana. And in this scripture, the Buddha says, a form body or a transformation body. In Sanskrit, we say nirmanakaya. This kind of body that can appear. A nirmanakaya comes forth from Buddha's dharmakaya, a manifestation body, a transformation body comes forth from the Buddha's reality body due to intensely observing Buddha. And because a nirmanakaya is the blessing of the Buddhas. I think this is this word, adhisthana in Sanskrit. It means like blessings. It's like the radiance of Buddha coming forth to touch us and help us. It's naturally these blessings of the reality body are flowing forth. So they are needed for us to kind of relate to the Buddha, but also it needs us to intensely observe the Buddha. There needs to be some request for the Buddha's response to come forth. So one of my teachers said, the dharmakaya, the reality body, is kind of like the power source of Buddha. And obviously we need the power source. That's kind of the main thing for this process to work. But also we need aspirations made on the Bodhisattva path, like wishes to be Buddha and to meet Buddha and to benefit beings. It's like our Bodhisattva vows made over a long time actually bring forth the dharmakaya. So we need this power source of the dharmakaya, we need these aspirations, and we need the minds of sentient beings for the reality body to manifest. It needs like a location to manifest. That's what we kind of mean by manifest. Is it needs to appear in a particular location, and this location that's needed, the only location that's needed is the mind of a sentient being. So with these three conditions, the reality body is the kind of power source, these aspirations to benefit beings made on the path to Buddhahood, and the minds of sentient beings. When these three conditions are present, then the reality body manifests as an appearance like the moon reflected in the water. Doesn't it seem strange that this reality body that's like space can respond to beings? Like, how can space respond? So it needs some kind of like, on the part of the sentient being, the mind of the sentient being, maybe we could qualify it a little bit too and say, it needs a mind of a sentient being that is open, that is, you could say, wants to meet the Buddha. But if that seems already too much, it's just open to meeting Buddha. We need an open mind on the part of the sentient being, and then the Buddha's response from the power source meets that openness. So the original story says the Buddha's reality body is like space, and yet it manifests appearances in response to beings. You could say, like the moon reflected in water, the story says. So in these are a bunch of metaphors, right? As the introduction said, those with wisdom can understand by means of metaphors. The Buddha used a lot of metaphors. This moon reflected in water is a common one throughout all of Buddha Dharma, especially in Zen. Dogen Zenji, our founder, loved this metaphor. We could say that the water is like us, sentient beings. Particularly, we could say it's like moment to moment experience of a sentient being that's happening is like the water. So like this body is like the water, this present feeling is like the water, the perception of the moment is like the water, our habit patterns are like water, our sentient being consciousness is like water, and then the moon of Buddha's reality body can shine in this water. And in a way, we could say it's always shining, but to appreciate this manifesting appearance of the moon of Buddha reflected in the water of this thought, in the water of this feeling, in the water of this perception. It helps to like calm the water so that the moon is reflected clearly. If the water is really wavy, then the moon just looks like a little bit of light maybe, but we can't really tell that it's a moon. Or if the water's calm and still, then we can see the clarity of the full moon radiantly appearing in this present experience, this present puddle of experience. And how do we make the water still and calm so that the moon can reflect clearly? Just calming ourselves. But particularly, I think that openness, we can even be having a chaotic experience. It's not going to calm down, but are we open to Buddha? Are we open to Buddha? If we are, then I would say metaphorically, this is like calming the water so that the reality body can shine in it. This openness, like a practice. If we're closed, if we're not open to Buddha, we just want to like indulge the chaos, forget about Buddha, then it's going to be hard to see the Buddha. But if we're open, it can still be chaotic. But it's a readiness and a willingness and openness. I think that's the main condition for the moon of Buddha's reality body to shine clearly in the water of this present experience. So this reality body that's like space, it manifests appearances in response to beings. It responds to openness. Buddha's reality body appears in this present experience due to us being open to that appearance. That's almost like our call to the Buddha, our request to the Buddha is just our openness. That's how it seems to me today. when we're open, then the water calms, and there's the moon already present. This story is about Caoshan, to introduce this wonderful ancestor, Caoshan. He is one of the main disciples of Dongshan, also one of our great ancestors. Caoshan and Dongshan in Japanese are Sozan and Tozan, and their names form the name of our lineage, the Soto lineage. It's the Sozan Tozan lineage. It's the Caoshan Dongshan lineage of Zen. These teachers lived in China in the 9th century, and their stream of understanding and their stream of metaphors comes to us through the Japanese teacher Dogen Zenji and Suzuki Roshi and Kobenchino Roshi and so on. So Caoshan, the hero of today's story, is the So of Soto Zen. And he's actually, apparently, he had various other names too. After he left Dongshan, he visited the Six Ancestors Temple, which is called Sao Creek. And he was so struck by the teachings of the Sixth Ancestor. And maybe when he was there, he was struck by the beauty of the temple and Sao Creek, that he then everywhere he went to kind of set up a Zen temple, he always named the mountain Caoshan after Sao Shi. He named it Sao Mountain after Sao Creek of the Sixth Ancestor, which means that actually we could call our Soto lineage the Sixth Ancestor Huineng and Dongshan school, because it's the same So of Soke or Sao Shi and Sao Shan. And actually, Sao Shan, his particular lineage after Dogen eventually died out. So our lineage doesn't actually come through Sao Shan, it comes through Dongshan and Sao Shan's Dharma brother. So for that reason, I like to say that our Soto school is named after the sixth ancestor, who is definitely one of our root ancestors in Dongshan. And others say that too. Anyway, Sao Shan practiced with Dongshan for quite some years. They had many conversations. And when Sao Shan was finally leaving his teacher Dongshan, just as he was leaving the temple, he put on his traveling hat, picked up his staff, and Dongshan, his teacher, said to him, "Where are you going?" And Sao Shan said, "I'm going to the place that never changes." And Dongshan asked, "Well, if the place is unchanging, then how can you go?" And Sao Shan said, "Going itself is unchanging." And Dongshan approved and let him go. seems that this story is a little bit related to this later story of Caoshan having a conversation with maybe one of his students. I'm going to the place that doesn't change. Well, how can you go? Because going is like changing. How can you go to the place that never changes? And Caoshan said, going itself is unchanging. Some relationship between the place that never changes is another name for the Buddha's true reality body, the dharmakaya. But it can appear and manifest in response to beings as picking up one's traveling staff and walking into the mountains to offer something to some other people somewhere else. Could be like that. So to go through the story at hand a little bit more slowly here. Caoshan said to Elder De, which it doesn't say so, but it maybe is one of his students or maybe a Dharma brother. They both call each other teacher. He said, Caoshan said, Buddha's true dharmakaya, reality body, is like empty space. It manifests appearances in response to beings like the moon reflected in the water. Apparently, that whole phrase is a quote from the Golden Light Sutra in some ancient version of the sutra. So they're exploring this teaching from the scriptures. Like, it's beautiful, it's a beautiful saying, but how can we understand it? Caoshan quotes the sutra. Buddha's true dharmakaya, true reality body is like empty space. It's a metaphor. Pretty good. Isn't now like empty space? That now has no boundaries like space. Now is actually timeless like space. Now is ungraspable like space. Now is invisible like space. Now allows everything to appear within it. I appreciate the metaphor of space here, the dharmakaya, empty of any graspable handholds or footholds or eye holds or ear holds, nose holds, tongue holds. Space doesn't have any of that. And yet, who could deny that this is now? It's not just nothing. Now, Buddha's true reality body is like empty space. And it manifests appearances in response to beings like the moon reflected in the water. There's another, it's like space and it's like the moon reflected in the water. So I'd have two metaphors going here. I kind of see it like the bright full moon is just another metaphor for the dharmakaya. Sometimes it helps to hear that it's like space totally ungraspable. And sometimes it helps to hear that it's bright and serene and radiant and yet cool, right in the middle of space. Moonlight is a cool kind of light, serene luminescence, full moonlight, and it responds like this moon reflected in the water. And you could say this metaphor is helping us open to how we can't actually get a hold of the full moon itself, but we can see its reflections in the water. Kind of imagining that we can't even see it in the sky, maybe is an implication of the metaphor, really where it meets us, sentient beings, us water beings, as a reflection. The reflection is one with us, and yet it's just a reflection of the moon. It's just an appearance of the moon on our water. And as I mentioned earlier, we could say I and you, each of us is a pool of water. Or we could say, maybe more specifically, maybe it helps to be more specific and say, each experience we're having is a unique puddle of water, a unique drop of water. Feeling of like tension in the body is a pool of water. And can we be open to the Buddha's reality body shining in this feeling of tension? This thought is a pool of water. Can we be open to the Buddha's reality body appearing as a reflection in this thought, one with this thought, inseparable from this thought? The actual dharmakaya appearing reflected in this thought in all its brightness, its serene brightness. So Caoshan asks his friend, Buddha's true dharmakaya is like empty space, and it manifests appearances like what appears to be form in response to beings, like the moon reflected in the water. So that's the quote. Now, Elder De, my good friend, let's try to express this in our own unique ways, this sutra quote. So Caoshan says, well, how do you, Elder De, express the principle of response? We're exploring how the dharmakaya responds to beings in these response bodies, these appearance bodies. That's the question. That's the heart of this story. How do you express this principle of response? And the comments on this story, Wan Song, another Zen ancestor that in this Soto lineage in China that lived centuries after Dongshan, Caoshan, he collected. Well, actually, there was already a collection of these stories, but he kind of commented on them and wrote little verses on each line, and he used these verses to comment. Like the style of these koan collections is there's a little verse comment on every line. And interestingly, the comments he used here are Caoshan's comments from some other talk of Caoshan. Quite dynamic what these ancestors were doing there, he kind of knew Caoshan's teachings, so he pulled out some other lines, seemingly unrelated lines of Caoshan, to comment on this first part of the koan. So Buddha's true reality body is like space. Is the commentator's comment? It's actually Caoshan's comment, and it is officially not even a needle is admitted. And that's kind of how the dharmakaya, like space, is officially not the tiniest graspable appearance is allowed in the dharmakaya. The dharmakaya is ungraspable. And if you say, well, can't this space include like just an atom of something graspable? No. Officially, or another translation is like publicly. So when we're talking about the dharmakaya, officially, not even a needle is admitted. I think they're just saying a tiny thing. And then commenting on the line, it manifests appearances in response to being. The comment of Caoshan, it gets added in here. Privately, even a horse and carriage are let through. We're talking about the dharmakaya, Buddha's reality body. Officially, not even a needle is admitted, but privately, personally, intimately, even a horse and carriage can come through this gate. That's kind of these two sides of Buddha's reality body. Officially, publicly, strictly speaking, not even a needle is admitted, but kind of unofficially, privately, intimately. Okay, actually, not only you are admitted, but you can bring your whole horse and buggy right through the gate here, actually, into the house. All of it can come through, but you know, stay kind of quiet about this here, because officially not even a needle is admitted. This is how the Zen ancestors sometimes talked, and how wonderful that Wan Song, the commentator, used Caoshan's own verse from some other place to bring out these two sides of the story. It's like space, and yet it responds intimately in every experience. Then Caoshan asked his friend, well, how do you express the principle of response? You just heard these nice metaphors. Dharmakaya is like space. It's like the moon reflected in the water when it responds to beings. How would you say it? Can you offer another metaphor? Because those with wisdom can understand by means of metaphors. So Elder De says, kind of creatively and wonderfully, it's like a donkey looking into a well. Maybe more accurately, peeping. This character means like kind of peeping into a well. You can imagine maybe a donkey, which I think in many cultures represents a little bit of like a dull, clumsy kind of creature compared to a majestic horse. So just an ordinary, a little bit dull, clumsy creature like a donkey. How is this donkey going to meet the Buddha's reality body? It kind of it's eating some grass, and it wanders up to a well in the ground, and basically like this hole in the ground. And it kind of like sticks its donkey neck out over the well and looks down into the damp darkness. musty smell down to the deep, dark well of dharmakaya, the deep, dark dharmakaya well. The donkey diligently looks, maybe not even that diligently, it's peeping, just sort of like with one eye, a little bit of curiosity. I think it takes a little bit of curiosity at least to call forth this response. Peeps into the well and sees deep darkness like vast space. And as its donkey eye starts to adjust to the deep darkness, what's that? It sees a little bit hazy. It's dark down there, but it sees itself reflected in the water at the bottom of the well. I say, wonderful, Elder De. What a great spontaneous metaphor. Like this clumsy creature, it's a little bit curious, looking into the deep, dark well. But what's at the bottom, it actually sees is itself reflected there. The Buddha's true reality body looks like this very experience at the bottom of a dark well, in appearing in the darkness of now. And the commentators comment on this line. He said something like, well, if I was there and I was asked that question, I would just stand in Shashu, approach Caoshan and say, yes. Commentators saying, that's how I would express the principle of response. So you might consider, if you were asked this question, how would you express this principle of response, the way that this inconceivable reality body responds to beings? That's a nice Zen enactment, simpler and not so metaphorical. Then Caoshan says, well said. You said a lot there, but you only said 80%. This is a phrase they sometimes use in these Zen stories, like pretty good, but like, can we take it further? Can more be expressed here? It's such a great conversation we're having. Can we keep it going? Can we take it deeper? Pretty good, but it's only 80% what you said. What's missing? That's what Elder De asked his friend. Well, how would you say it, teacher? How would you express it? And Caoshan says, playing with his friend's metaphor, it's like the well looking at the donkey. Elder De says it's like the donkey looking at the well. And Caoshan kind of caps it off and completes the 100% by saying, I would say it's like the well looking at the donkey. He couldn't have said that if his friend didn't say it's like the donkey looking at the well. So together, they make 100%. And my teacher, old Buddha Tenchin, when commenting on the story, he said, it's not so much that that De's response is 80% and Caoshan's is 100%. They're actually both 80%. If it said it's like the well looking at the donkey, that's only 80% too. So you always need the other side. So together they could make 100% expression. It's not like either one is better or worse. It's just completing the story. Like the donkey peeping into the well, like the well peeping at the donkey. And the commentator Wan Song's verses to celebrate these two lines. For the donkey looking at the well, the poetic verse is the falling flowers consciously go along with the flowing stream. Picture the cherry blossoms over a stream falling off the tree into the stream. The falling flowers consciously or intentionally accord with and follow the flowing stream. And the verse for the well looks at the donkey is the flowing stream mindlessly carries the fallen flowers. It's two ways of looking at the same event. You could say these particular, unique, individual flowers falling into the stream when they meet this beginningless, endless stream. From one perspective, you could say they consciously, intentionally try to accord with the stream of reality. And the other side of the story is that the stream of reality mindlessly, with no mind at all, with no intention, carries the fallen flowers along. You see how this is two sides. One is kind of making a little bit effort to peep, to look for the dharmakaya. Like old Buddha Linji once said, there's a true person of no position, constantly moving in and out through the portals of your face. And if you haven't seen her yet, then look. That's the meditation instruction of Linji in that case. If you haven't seen this true person, it's another name for the dharmakaya, then look. Where do we look for space? Just have to be open, because we're not going to see it as some thing, but it's a practice of looking. We don't look outward. We don't exactly look inward. We don't look anywhere, and yet we open our eyes and peep. So that's one side. That's like the fallen flowers consciously, intentionally follow along with the reality stream and experience it directly. But then also, the reality stream is mindlessly and intentionlessly carrying the fallen flowers at the same time with no effort at all. The well doesn't have to make any effort to look at the donkey. So that's a little bit like Dongshan, Caoshan's teacher Dongshan, when said, "You are not it. In truth, it is you." This also expresses the principle of response, much like the well looks at the donkey. So Dogen Zenji, very much like this metaphor of the moon reflecting in the water. And he went so far as to say awakening, satori, awakening, understanding, realization is like the moon reflected in the water. The moon does not get wet, nor is the water broken. Which is a little bit like many centuries before Dogen said that, the Tiantai founder Zhi also was playing with the same metaphor. And he said, it's the water doesn't rise up into the sky, nor does the moon descend to the water. Yet, this one moon in a single instant is manifest in all bodies of water. Buddhas and sentient beings are united through the openness of sentient beings and the response of Buddhas. In Japanese, we say kano doko. Openness and response merging. So, old Tiantai Jiri said that you don't have to bring the water up to the moon, and the moon doesn't have to come down to the water without moving a particle. Right? There is this meeting. So Dogen says, the moon does not get wet, nor is the water broken. I think it's kind of similar to this. The moon is reflected in the water, but the moon doesn't get wet by the experience of tension in the belly. That doesn't wet the moon. And the tension in the belly, this water pool, tension in the belly, doesn't get broken by the moon either. Dogen says, although the moon's light is wide and great, the moon is reflected even in a puddle an inch wide. The whole moon and the entire sky are reflected in dewdrops on the grass or even in one drop of water. Enlightenment, satori, does not divide you, just as the moon does not break the water. You cannot hinder this enlightenment, just as a drop of water does not hinder the moon in the sky. The depth of the drop is the height of the moon. In other words, the particular size, shape, time, and flavor of this present experience is the exact size of the moon reflected in it. So the whole entire dharmakaya moon is reflected in a tiny little nitpicky experience. And it's completely reflected in a big, vast experience. Every experience is completely encompasses the entire dharmakaya moon. The depth of the drop is the height of the moon, is a great line to meditate on from Dogen. Not only that, but however long or short its duration, each reflection manifests the vastness of the dewdrop and realizes the limitlessness of the moonlight in the sky. So even if you feel like you get some glimpse of understanding just for a moment, that's a very short duration of time, but the entire dharmakaya is reflected completely in that short duration. Even one moment of zazen completely includes everything. And lastly, I just to throw this in, there's some story floating around that this Chinese character for donkey is very similar to the Chinese character for pulley. I mean, that's that's a story that's widespread. If you look at these two characters, they're very similar, but not the same. But the story that's floating around is that some older versions of this koan, maybe originally the story said pulley, and then later copiers, made a transcription error and put down the character for donkey instead of pulley. It's very different, but my teacher in his third turning of the wheel book brings up this story, and he translates it as pulley based on this possibility that in really ancient times, the original dialect was talking about a pulley looking at a well and a well looking at a pulley. So here the pulley, we could say, is at the top of the well. And it has, the rope and the bucket. And so this whole apparatus of pulley, wheel, and bucket is like the sentient being calling forth the dharmakaya by lowering this bucket into the deep, dark well to scoop up some dharmakaya. And meanwhile, the dharmakaya is happy to just flow into the bucket when the bucket's lowered deep down. So it's a whole different sort of image in a way, and yet it's not that different really. It's still the principle of response to the peeping of a donkey or to the lowering of a bucket on a long rope when it feels like we're at the end of our rope and it still hasn't reached the dharmakaya. We can call our friends, maybe they have some extra rope, we can tie it on there and lower it even deeper. So that's today's story. And as always in the world of sentient beings, it always seems to be getting late. But I don't know if do we have time for a few questions? If anyone would like. Yes, Koren-san.
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering if you could say a little bit more about being open to Buddha.
And we heard a lot of metaphors here. So what exactly is the practice of being open to Buddha? Yeah, because that's the central practice I feel like is being offered in this story. And, Buddha's doing Buddha's part, but from our side, our practice is being open to Buddha. So I think it's partly coming into the present, or we feel to be the present, especially if we're really kind of obsessing about past or future. I'm open to Buddha because I hear that the Dharmakaya is a name for now. So like, let's try to line up my little human nowness with the unchanging nowness. That's kind of an openness. And it's kind of like, it's kind of a willingness to let go of our current thought fixation. But there's so many kinds of openness. So just like relaxing. And also, maybe in terms of today's story, we're hearing these strange metaphors and images from these ancient Zen ancestors. I think it takes a lot of openness to be willing to hear these kind of stories, and have them turn us. It's like some of you might have been thinking, why can't Kokyo just tell us the practice of just being open? Let's just how to do that. Why do we have to have all the ancient Chinese metaphors? So I think being open to ancient Chinese metaphors is also part of being open to Buddha, because that happens to be the experience that's happening. at this time. So if ancient Chinese metaphors are like flying at us, then at that time, the openness to that would be like, I don't really understand why they're saying it this way, and it seems like it's overly complicated, but like, I'm just gonna try to be open to it, or open. And another one might be, yeah, just curiosity, right? Like the donkey that happens to see a well over there, and it's been eating the grass all day. But this is something different. There's like a hole in the ground. And it could just ignore it because that doesn't look like there's no grass to eat in that hole. So why bother with that little bit of curiosity? It's like, let's check it out. Is another kind of openness.
I love. I feel like they're good. I don't know how to play like they do, so I feel like I have to learn how to look. You know, that's. But I love hearing them, and I have deep, deep gratitude for you sharing them.
Yeah, how to look. Sometimes the stories just like warm us up to maybe that's one way of talking a little bit rationally about these old Zen stories, is they help us open because they're so unusual. They can help us open because they're so unusual, and they kind of keep our attention, and we might want a more streamlined practical instruction. But if we just that wanting the streamlined practical kind of quick fix or something is maybe not always that open, right? So this is like, let's can we, if we're open to these strange stories, and then open to like the comments on them, and then the comments on the comments, and like to be pretty open and patient is kind of similar to open, right? And maybe that's part of the trick, part of the design of these strange Zen stories, is they help open us, and also maybe they open part of our being that's not just the rational mind. I think they do. I find they help that way because they don't always sound so rational. Rational is good sometimes too. We should be open to rational, like Nagarjuna's hair-splitting logic, very different mood than Zen koans. That would be good to open to when it's coming at us. And so would somebody just coming up and standing in shashu in front of us and saying yes. Sometimes that's hard to open to. Yeah, well, what do you mean? What do you want? Open to ready, curious, patient with the present experience. Yes, thank you. Oh, Tracy.
Hello, Kokyo, and thank you, Jikoji, for hosting Kokyo and all of us. Can I offer a half-baked metaphor? It aspires to maybe 40%. Today's the first day of summer, right?
Oh, happy summer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that right? So today is the solstice, right?
Yes, it's the solstice. That's right. In
So
the human
sun,
world.
in the human world, in the northern hemisphere, it's
That's right.
the solstice, sun still, right? Sun stands still. Or the sun appears to stand still at its highest point in the course of the year in the northern hemisphere that we call the beginning of summer. So in other words, we're receiving the most amount of sunlight or serene luminescence that sentient beings in the northern hemisphere are going to receive.
This is our opportunity today. Today is the day. Yes. And if we happen to right about now, right about like noontime, we could go out and peep into a well, and it may be that the sun is directly over the well. So at this one time of right now, we can look down, and instead of seeing damp darkness, we'll see radiant, blazing light at the bottom of the well.
And ourselves reflected in it, absorbed completely in that full expression of the sun filling the bottom of the well. Thank you.
Well said.
Go ahead.
That's 90%.
90. Excellent. Thank you.
Want to know how I would say it? The sun from the bottom of the well leaps up to the highest heaven of Akanishta. And on its way up, it drops all its sunbeams all over the earth, cooling the hot fires of summer with its radiant light. Thank you all for your patience and openness. May our intention equally extend to every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it.